y'all? Welcome to another edition of Tutorial Tuesday. It's your boy Greeky and Ian Hip Hop Beats. Today we're going over mixing and gain staging and the finishing of a beat. So I made a beat yesterday, and there's a lot of times where I'll do a beat making video and then I show the final beat at the end, but there's a bunch of stuff in between that I do to tweak the mix and things like that. So instead of leaving that part out this time, I figured I'd just make the beat for the episode yesterday. And so if you want to see that, there'll be a card up here somewhere you can click on to see how the beat was made. Then you can come back to this video. Or if you already watched the video from yesterday, you can go ahead and just follow along here. I'll show you the process that I do when it comes to actually mixing a beat to get ready to upload it to the internet, to YouTube, or wherever I'm going to display the beat for rappers to hop on. Let's get to it. All right, so here is the beat that I did yesterday. All right, so first things first, we need to go through all the different mixer channels and make sure that nothing is distorting. A lot of times when I'm making a beat, I usually mix as I go. So typically when you add EQ to something, or if you add reverb and delay to it, or if you're changing the levels around and things like that, those are technically mixing processes. Sometimes I guess people will do all the mixing at the end, but just in terms of making the beat, I like to, do things as I go. So here's the sample. So channel 1 is going to be the sample. And I'm going to go ahead and just highlight one of the main portions of the beat where all the instruments come into play. Actually, let's do this one because it has the tom roll at the end as well. And so just on the sample here, you'll notice that we have an EQ, a Maximus, another EQ. We have the sound goodizer, which is like compression and distortion. Then I have a limiter on it as well. So what I want to do first is turn all these off and make sure that it's not going above 0 dB, or else it's going to create some distortion. So it looks like it's peaking at about 6. We'll go ahead and turn on this first. So we're going to get into the gain staging process right now. So it's peaked up at around 6. I'm going to go ahead and turn on this first EQ that looks like this. And as soon as we turn it on, you'll notice it started peaking around 6. Now it's down to a little bit above 9, kind of around 8. So we're going to use this volume slider right here to go ahead and turn it up a little bit until it's peaking at 6. And so whenever you EQ something, you're taking away sound from it, especially if you're doing subtractive EQ. And so you want to be able, since you shaped the sound, you want to bring the gain, the level back up. Since you subtracted away stuff from the sound, you want to bring back up the levels of the stuff you didn't subtract to highlight it to make it stand out in the beat more. The next one here is Maximus. I use Maximus for the, I use Maximus for the lo-fi feature. It helps kind of deaden the sound a little bit and kind of take out some of the high end. A lot of times when I'm using samples, there's a lot of like treble or unnecessary like static or noise in the high end of the beat. So using the lo-fi and using the right amount of it can kind of help clear some of that out. So that's another mixing technique for you. All right, so now it's hitting just a little bit below 6. So we got the post gain knob right here. We're going to turn it up just a little bit. Now it's hitting right around just above 6 where it was before. The next parametric EQ. So a lot of times with samples, they'll be, especially the older samples that you use, they will just have very strong sounds at some point. And sometimes if it's hitting too strong, especially if you're raising the level of the sample and the beat, it could cause some distortion. So what I like to do is I like to find the peaks where maybe the sound's a little bit too strong and drop them down a little bit. That way you still get the overall sound and you kind of just fine tune it to places that won't cause any unnecessary distortion. And so if we turn that on, it's still hitting right around 6, so we're going to go ahead and leave that as is. We got the Sound Goodizer next. And that's still hitting around 6. And then I got the limiter. And the reason I use the limiter on samples is sometimes, especially with this sample, it has drums in it. And I use it for compression. I just want to clip off any of the peaks or transients that pop up that might cause distortion. So if you watch it here in the limiter, actually, you know, when I was first using the limiter on this beat, it had some peaks and transients with it. Now that I look at it, there's not any. It looks like everything's been kind of flattened down. I think it's from the Sound Goodizer because that's a compressor. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of the limiter. I don't think I need the compressor on it because I'm using the Sound Goodizer, which adds a little compression to it as well. Next up, I got the kick, and I used some parallel compression on it. And so if we take the parametric EQ off of this main channel here, and I think I just have the limiter on these other two, yeah. So right now my kick is clipping, it's going above 0 dB. I cranked the velocity too much right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and just bring this back down to down to about 3. And then because I used parallel compression here, so again, I have other videos on parallel compression. I'll try to put a card up on the screen if you want to see more about that. But basically it just comes down to taking the signal, sending it to 2 separate channels, compressing the crap out of one of them, and then making both of those go into another channel. That way it has half just the organic sound and half the compressed sound. So it helps remove some of the transients that might cause distortion or might take away from the sound, but at the same time it doesn't compress it so much that the drum just sounds flat or dull. And so at the end I'm going to mix all the sounds together with the full beat playing, but I do want this back up to about 3, so I'm going to go ahead and actually we need to go ahead and turn on the parametric EQ here first, see how it sounds after that. All right, so it looks like it was hitting at 3 before. Now it's just right down to a little bit above 6, so I'm going to go ahead and raise it up till it gets up to a 3. And then as far as the levels goes, they don't matter right now. You do have to compare it to the other sounds that you're using, but we'll go ahead and just hit it hitting around 3 right now. Next up, we got the snare. So with the snare, I got the EQ off. With the snare, it has a slight jump, so I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and go to the main one here. Ooh. All right, next we got a little hat here. It's hitting right at right under, or right just a little bit more than 24. Then when I turn it back on, it's pretty much the same, so nothing really to do on that one. Next, we got the hi-hat over here. I actually didn't have any EQ on this, and if you have headphones on or good speakers, you can kind of hear the bass in it right now. So it's peaking at about 12 right now. We're going to go ahead and add an EQ on it. Cut out this low end. And now it's peaking at about 11, so it's going to bring it down just a little bit. With hats and instruments that aren't quite as loud, you don't have to worry about distortion as much, but just as good practice, I still like to use the same gain staging principles. Now with the bass here, I got a couple EQs on it, and I have some distortion as well. It sounds like I probably need to bring that distortion down a little bit, but we'll see how. Probably alter the distortion when the rest of the beat's playing. Like as the bass is playing on its own, it sounds pretty distorted, but sometimes you want that. You want a little bit of saturation. That's good distortion, because when it's not going to be solo, it's going to be playing with the rest of the beat, and that extra saturation helps it stand out in the mix a little bit more without getting too loud and overpowering the other sounds. So without anything, again, right above 6, just like the original sample. When we cut out all the high end with this EQ, yeah, definitely need to bring a lot of extra gain to the bass there. And then I added another EQ because, as you can tell, you can still hear the high end of the sample with this, and I want to get all of it out. I'm just using the bass line from the sample and then mixing it separately. You can just play the sample as is and not EQ out the bass line, but I feel like you have more control over your beat if you take the sample and chop it into a high end and a low end. Mixing the bass with all the other instruments is a lot more difficult than mixing the rest of the sample, the rest of the frequencies of the sample. So I like to separate them to have more control over them. Yeah, as soon as I turn on that second EQ, pretty much all you can hear is the bass now. And now it's peaking all the way up here, right up below 3, so we're going to bring it back down just a little bit. Now we got the distortion on here, which I'll probably be changing, but we'll see. And so with gain staging, you want to get rid of unnecessary distortion, but when you have a distortion tool, it's going to add distortion anyway. So getting the post gain on the distortion really isn't as important. It's more about just getting the sound that you want. I'm going to go ahead and just turn this off for right now as we're listening to it with the rest of the beat. And then I'll add more distortion into it later if we need the bass to stand out a little bit more. All right, let's go ahead and unmute all these different tracks. And yeah, as you can see, I have all the different levels here, and I haven't heard this beat since yesterday. It's a good practice if you're mixing a beat and you really want it to sound good to take a break from mixing it or from listening to it. When you continue to listen to the same sounds over and over again, like a repetitive beat over and over again when you're making the beat, those frequencies that you keep hearing in your ear over and over again, they become more dull over time. Your ears need a little bit of rest so you can actually pick those up in the future. So usually the best thing to do when you're mixing a beat, make it, walk away from it, come back to it, listen to it, walk away from it, come back to it, listen to it. That way you have fresh ears on it every time. The big key with mixing, especially when you're at this part where you're trying to mix all the levels so it sounds good, is more just about being able to hear the sounds. The key is, can you hear everything? So another thing that happens when you continue to listen to music loud over and over again, you have to keep playing it louder and louder over and over again. When you mix, you want to mix things at a low volume. When you mix things at a lower volume, it forces your ears to actually have to listen and pick up on the sounds. When you have everything too loud, it's obviously going to sound good, but it's hard to get a relative, gauge on the different instruments compared to one another. So what I like to do, and everybody's computer is different, but I take my volume and I turn it down to about 14, 12, 16, somewhere in that range. I want everything to be super low. I want to be able to hear everything at a low volume. That way when I bring it up, I know I'm going to be able to hear everything. And then because I did the gain staging, I know everything's not going to be distorted as well. So I can bring it up with the confidence of knowing that it's not going to really distort the sound. So let's go ahead and get a listen to it on this lower level right now. For you guys, the level's not going to change. For me, it's different. Whatever. All right, so I think I might have the sample up a little bit louder than I want, and I think I need the bass line up a little bit louder. Also, this kick drum, I don't know if I just need a different sample or what, but I think it's not really getting the punch that I want. So one tool you can use with kicks, you can use what's called the wave shaper here. And the wave shaper will just help give it a little more punch. Obviously, if you go too far with it, you could add distortion. So just kind of use it, as your ear tells you where it's good. All right, since I did a lot of mixing as I went, I don't know if there's that much with the levels to change. Now that I've listened to it on a lower volume, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back up again to still make sure it sounds good at a higher volume. All right, I think it's pretty good. I guess I did a pretty good job of mixing it while I went beforehand. But even at this point, again, you want to listen to what instruments sound too loud, what instruments don't sound loud enough. If you can't really tell, turn the volume down. Can you hear everything at a lower volume? I mean, if you have it at a lower volume, you can hear some instruments if you can't hear others, and you need to either subtract some things out or raise some things that you can't really hear. The last thing I do, and this is the mixing on a budget thing, which I'm not going to be able to really show in the video here, is my headphones are only so good at picking up all the frequencies and this and that. One thing I will do with a beat a lot of times, especially with these newer headphones that aren't quite as good as the old ones that I had, is I'll actually take my computer out to the car, plug in the aux port, and listen to the mix in my car. Nowadays, the acoustic technology in cars is like probably the best place you're going to be able to listen to a decent mix inside of, anything that you have. If you have a car built, after the 2010s, the acoustics inside the car are really good. It's just a good practice is to listen to your mix on multiple speakers if you really want to get that premium sound. And your car is definitely one of those places. So one thing you can do is you can just plug it into the aux cord, play it, see how it sounds. If you don't have that option, you can always try. This isn't quite optimal, but you can just upload it to like SoundCloud or YouTube or anywhere. It's put it, private so no one else can hear it, and then you can just play it like maybe on your phone or whatever device in your car as well. You'll get an idea if there's instruments that are too loud or too soft, or your mix is off through that as well. Again, not optimal. I mean, the best thing to do is go get $1 million, studio to mix your beats. That way that the sound and the acoustics are all perfect. You can hear every frequency perfectly. If you're like me, you probably don't have that kind of option. So the second best bet, listen to it on multiple speakers and try to listen to into your car as well. That way you can just hear everything. All right, so I just gain staged it. I mixed all the levels. I like how they are right now. Again, what I'm probably going to do with the beat, I'm probably going to let it sit, and then I'll probably come back to it maybe in a half hour or hour or so. Just listen to it one more time. If there's any sounds that are going to stand out to me, I'll go ahead and edit those first. If I come back to it and everything sounds good and I'm snapping my neck to it, then we're going to save it and upload it here in the future. If you got any questions about anything I did, or if you like stuff like this or want to see more stuff like this in the future, definitely let me know. If you got any suggestions for me or anything I could do to help improve my mix, I'm always willing to learn as well. So I appreciate everyone watching the video. Thank you, and until next time, have a good one, y'all.